Russian President Vladimir Putin and senior Chinese diplomat Wang Yi met in Moscow in a move to bolster diplomatic relations.
1 year after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and a special tribunal to prosecute war crimes is still not set up.
The visit of China's top diplomat to Moscow ahead of the first anniversary of the Ukraine war is a potent message from Beijing to both Russia and the US. Wang Yi was welcomed by Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said their countries have a common strategic interest in standing together on the world stage.
Сотрудничество на международной арене между Китайской Народной Республикой и Российской Федерацией, как мы неоднократно подчеркивали, имеют очень важное значение для стабилизации международной обстановки.
China has declined to criticize Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Wang Yi hinted that it would not be pressured by the US into doing so.
中俄的全面战略伙伴关系从不针对第三方，当然也就不受任何第三方的干扰和挑拨，我们更不会被第三方的胁迫和施压所压倒。
Joint naval drills between Russia and China in South Africa are further evidence of growing military cooperation. The US fears China is poised to go further and supply the Kremlin with arms for the war in Ukraine. Beijing has denied it has such plans and has condemned Washington for providing weapons to Ukraine.
Speaking at a huge pro-war rally in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the country is engaged in a battle for its historic borders. He hailed Russia's soldiers fighting in Ukraine and called on the crowd to cheer to show their support for the troops.
Но я знаю, вот сейчас только слушал высшее военное руководство страны о том, что прямо сейчас идет бой на наших исторических рубежах за наших людей. Его ведут такие же мужественные бойцы, которые здесь стоят сейчас, рядом с нами.
Tens of thousands of people waving Russian flags chanted Russia, Russia at the event in Luzhniki Stadium, honouring defenders of the fatherland.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and his political and military leadership should be tried for crimes of aggression against Ukraine. That's what the European Commission and Parliament decided last year, saying a special tribunal should be set up, as was the case after World War II. Germany and the US have been some of the most vocal countries on the idea as the conflict has played out. But there's one major roadblock: Russia, which would veto any resolution to that effect presented to the United Nations Security Council. The task may instead be given to the 193 member states of the UN General Assembly.
The resolutions voted by the United Nations General Assembly are not binding. So such a resolution would offer more legitimacy to the tribunal, and that is certain, depending of course on the majority. The broader the majority, the more legitimacy the tribunal will have. But it still does not mean that Russia will have to cooperate, for example, with the tribunal. So it is really more a political matter than a legal one.
And how does one collect evidence about this crime of aggression, considering that the European Commission just announced that they will have a specific center with experts from July on dedicated to this task?
There is no doubt that this operation violates the United Nations Charter, and the difficulty here is that we don't really have recent precedents of collecting evidence for the crime of aggression. So it will be interesting to see how the center tackles this.
The International Criminal Court is already investigating allegations of war crimes and genocide in Ukraine. Russia, however, does not recognize the authority of the ICC, which is accepted by 123 countries, including all 27 of the EU. Neither does the US, though, but it wants to help.
Yes, indeed. The United States is not a member of the Rome Statute, which created the International Criminal Court, but there are many ways in which we can be and have been supportive of the work of the court. This includes a whole range of diplomatic support, of course. We can also assist with the capture and transfer of suspects.
When it comes to the creation of a special tribunal to prosecute Russia and its leadership, the US ambassador says that there are several options on the table.
Ukraine could also enter into a treaty with, for example, the Council of Europe or even the European Union potentially to create more of a regional body. Ukraine could also create a tribunal internal to its own system, but then allow international prosecutors, judges, and other experts to staff various positions. We've seen these sort of hybrid models around the world.
Ukraine's Prosecutor General Andrei Kostin says authorities have registered more than 65,000 war crimes since the invasion began a year ago, including executions and sexual violence.
Ukraine told schools to hold classes remotely from the 22nd and until the 24th of February because of the risk of Russian missile strikes around the first anniversary of Moscow's 2022 full-scale invasion. When it comes to the situation on the ground, it is unlikely that Russian forces can deliver any victory there until the 24th of February, assumed the Institute for the Study of War and the UK Defence Ministry. Russian forces continued making incremental tactical gains in and around Bakhmut in the east of Ukraine. The US-based think tank says the geolocated footage from that area may suggest that Russian forces have given up on trying to encircle Bakhmut and are instead focusing on fighting into Bakhmut from the north. Ukrainian officials reported that Russian forces continue to reinforce and build fortifications in rear areas of southern Ukraine. Ukrainian Melitopol mayor says Russian forces increased the number of Wagner Group forces, mobilized personnel and battalions of North Ossetian and Dagestani personnel in unspecified areas of Zaporizhia region. The Institute for the Study of War concluded transporting such irregular forces who are likely battle-weary, poorly trained or both to Zaporizhia region suggests that Russian military leadership has deprioritized making any new territorial gains in this part of the south of Ukraine.
Anxious parents in a grief-stricken community following the fatal stabbing of a teacher by a student at a private school in southwest France. Pupils at the scene say the 16-year-old entered a Spanish class mid-lesson, locked the door and stabbed the 52-year-old teacher in the chest. She died of her injuries.
Je ne l'ai pas vraiment vu se lever, mais quand il a planté le couteau, il était très calme. C'était une professeure, elle n'avait rien de spécial, elle était gentille, elle n'avait jamais fait de remarques négatives, enfin, elle n'avait pas une relation spécialement mauvaise avec cet élève.
The French government has expressed its support for all those affected, while the education minister travelled to the school.
C'est un jour triste pour l'éducation nationale. C'est un jour triste, bien sûr, pour cet établissement. Et le temps, bien sûr, de l'enquête va venir. Le temps de conclusion éventuelle viendra.
The assailant is being investigated for premeditated murder. Attacks like these are rare in France, but teacher safety is a growing concern. Chaos, death and destruction in the occupied West Bank. Israeli forces killed at least 10 Palestinians on Wednesday, including a 72-year-old man in the ancient city of Nablus. The Palestinian Health Ministry says some 102 people were wounded in the daytime raid, while 6 are in critical condition. This after another bloody battle last month. That raid was followed by a deadly Palestinian attack outside a synagogue in East Jerusalem. Israel's military says its aim in Nablus was to arrest 3 suspected militants, but claimed the wanted men opened fire when they were asked to surrender. Residents fear more bloodshed is to come, while the Hamas militant group warns its patience is running out.
Almost 1 million people applied for asylum in the EU, Norway and Switzerland in 2022, a 50% increase on the previous year. Though most entered legally, some were unregulated migrants arriving by boat. The figures from the EU's asylum agency show the greatest number of applications, 132,000, were from Syria. followed by Afghans at 129,000. The third largest group was Turks, with 55,000 requests. The numbers don't include the more than 4 million Ukrainians who were given separate temporary protection after fleeing the war in their country. Ukraine has been going through the largest humanitarian crisis in Europe since the end of the Second World War. It's the highest level of asylum demand since the refugee crisis of 2015-2016. The EU agency says it's most likely been driven by the ongoing easing of COVID-19 travel restrictions, combined with increasing food insecurity and conflicts around the world.
Please welcome our guest of honor.
A Lifetime Achievement Award for a Hollywood great. Academy Award-winning filmmaker Steven Spielberg received a standing ovation on Tuesday when presented with an honorary Golden Bear at the 73rd Berlinale Film Festival. The 76-year-old mastermind behind cinematic classics, including the Oscar-winning exploration of the Holocaust Schindler's List, highlighted the significance of receiving the award in Berlin.
This honor has particular meaning for me because I'm a Jewish director. And I like to believe that this is a small moment in a much larger, ongoing effort of healing the broken places of history, what Jews call tikkun olam, the repairing and restoring of the world.
Thank you so much, everybody. This, ever.
Movies are dreams.
Spielberg is also hoping to clean up at the Oscars in just a few weeks. His semi-autobiographical film, The Fabelmans, has been nominated 5 times, including Best Screenplay and Best Picture. Starring Paul Dano and Michelle Williams, Spielberg says it was the most emotional project he has ever worked on.